ourselves of that. And also the study of systematic theology on Wednesday nights. And we come here to verse number 4 and 5, which I spent a lot of time meditating on these verses. We'll go ahead and read through from verse 1 in chapter 3 on down to verse 7. This is a true saying, if a man desire the office of a bishop, he desireth a good work. A bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, of good behavior, given to hospitality, apt to teach, not given to wine, no striker, not greedy of filthy lucre, but patient, not a brawler, not covetous. One that ruleth well his own house, having his children in subjection with all gravity. For if a man know not how to rule his own house, how shall he take care of the church of God? Not a novice, lest being lifted up with pride, he fall into the condemnation of the devil. Moreover, he must have a good report of them which are without, lest he fall into the reproach and the snare of the devil. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Our Heavenly Father, Lord, as we come to you this afternoon, Lord, I pray that you'd be with us as we go throughout our service. Lord, I pray that we would, Lord, have the ears to hear, that we would, Lord, just preach the message that brings you honor and glory. Lord, I pray that you just help us, be our help and be our guide as we speak. In Jesus' name, amen. We've spent so much time talking about this thought of raising our children up to be missionaries, preachers, pastors, or their wives, and the important part that they all play. And what we really learned in the book of 1 Timothy is how quickly we can just be off kilter just a little bit. Right now, my pulpit is tilted a quarter of an inch to the right, and it just doesn't feel right. There, see? You got to get it just right, or it doesn't feel right. It lines up on that line, and if it's not there, it doesn't work. And it just makes me feel like I'm just a little bit to the left, you know? And oftentimes, we get that spirit, like Brother Derek taught, of close enough is good enough. We look at these qualifications in 1 Timothy chapter 3, and we think, well, close enough is good enough. I have this, I have this, I have this. We get into that point where we have disqualified ourselves, men, for things that we have done in our lives, and we think, well, this really doesn't apply to me. But it does. It does. It applies to you. It applies, again, it goes back to what Brother Matt had taught in Sunday school. What are you teaching your children? How you may have done things before you were saved that disqualifies you from ever being a part of this. But what about your children? What about the accountability and the things in which you teach? We talked about verse 1 in just the work that it is. We talked in verse 2 about the qualifications, the things that you should be. And in verse 3, we talked about the disqualifications, those character traits, those things that we shouldn't do, we shouldn't be. Verse number 4 and 5 is where it will literally hit us home. It goes right back to our house. It talks about how we move, how things run at home. One that ruleth well his own house, having his children in subjection with all gravity. For if a man know not how to rule his own house, how shall he take care of the church of God? Verse 5 to me seems more of a rhetorical question. It answers itself. If you can't take care of your house, why would you be charged with taking care of the house of God? The other thing you see is in verse number 4, when it says, one that ruleth his own house well. What struck me when I looked at that verse, one that ruleth well his own house. I always read that backwards. When I look at that verse, that means you can rule your house and do it wrong. You could be one that rules your house wrong. But what does that mean? There's an attitude problem. There's a you problem in that. There's a selfishness to you. You know, we have this thing in life, and we don't educate our children. Let's say we've disqualified ourselves. We need to educate our children what marriage should be. We need to promote. I should look it up. I didn't even think about it. But here in I would venture to guess, last time I seen a statistic, the average marriage age was in its late 20s. And I would say now it's getting closer to being in its early 30s because less and less people are getting married. And in my opinion, in my belief, we ought to be educating our children that there's nothing wrong with getting married young. There's nothing wrong with getting married young, not having a whole lot and leaning on the Lord to get through. I look around the room and I know many of you that got married young. And my wife and I were 20 and 18, almost 19. And it should be known to our young men that it starts the moment you leave mom and dad. That ruling your house well, it starts then. But what are we doing? What are we doing to teach it? Well, you might say, well, I don't have any desire to be a preacher. Well, guess what? I didn't either. I don't have any desire to be a pastor. I didn't either. The Lord gave me that desire. The Lord placed me in that. So, don't discredit yourself. If you're qualified, you might be called. That's a scary thing. Don't worry, you'll get over it. I didn't say you get over yourself. It'd be hard to do that, but you'll get over it. But one that ruleth his house well, has his house in control, has the authority to rule his house well, not wrong, not poorly, started off the right foot, started correctly, has a respect, has an authority. In a minute, I want to read you a passage of a man who didn't rule his house well. And it's not Eli. We know Eli didn't rule his house well. Eli didn't restrain his sons. Eli didn't say what they should do. Eli didn't have that expectation for his children that they would be an Eli spot. Eli, we have this word in society that we've learned that it's a bad word. It's called no. It's now been told that that's a bad word. Husbands, you need to learn how to say it a little bit more. With love. Wives, you need to be okay with hearing it a little bit more. With love. You need to be a little more submissive to it. With love. Children, get used to it. It's not going anywhere. With love. An easy no, a respectful no, should be met with a yes, an okay. But husbands, if you're not in the place where you should be, if you're not ruling your house, running your house, I don't even like the word ruling, but running your house as you should, your no's aren't going to be met very warmly. Eli didn't tell his sons no. Abraham demanded that his house serve the Lord. What is your house? Examine your house now. What is your house? What is your house serving? So we see here in these two verses, a failure at home disqualifies a man from the ministry. That should really hit you. It'd make you think how important your home is. How important neglecting your home is. Again, I had another reference. I've got to use it. Even though you're here, I've got to use it. Brother Daniel didn't come on his own for a year. He brought his whole family with him. As difficult as it is. You can't rule your house if you're not there, man. You can't run it. You can't have authority in it. You can't keep it subject. You can't do what you need to do if you're not present. And I'm talking, that may mean that you don't make as much money, that you find that fine line. There's a blessing that comes from being present, from being there. Let's talk about a man that didn't rule his house well. Go to Exodus. Go to Exodus chapter 4. Verse 24. Exodus 4, verse 24. And it came to pass by the way in the inn that the Lord met him and sought to kill him. Then Zipporah took a sharp stone and cut off the foreskin of her son and cast it at his feet and said, Surely a bloody husband art thou to me. That's a wife who finally got told no. See, one of Moses' sons, we don't have the time to go into it, one of Moses' sons was circumcised like Moses was commanded. The other one was not, because his wife didn't want to inflict pain on her son. And so instead of Moses saying, no, we're doing this because I'm commanded, I'm sorry you don't like it, but this is what we're going to do, Moses finds himself at a near-death position on his way to rescue the Israelites. And guess what? The no still happened. The no was still said. What God commanded to get done was still done. God wasn't going to let Moses go into Egypt and take his people out without having his family right first. Men have no business being in the pulpit, in the ministry, in the position of leadership when their family isn't right first, when their family's not taken care of, when things aren't done at home as they should. Moses, that near death, why is that? Because there was inconsistencies in his house. That's one of the scariest things I find about preaching, about pastoring. Getting those messages that are gut punches and going, man, I got to change things at home. I can't have inconsistencies in the way that I live. I can't preach that and live that way. I mean, look at Moses. We see that Moses conceded to the wishes of his wife. Men and women, one of the things I've learned here, and I guess I should say my brothers and sisters today, that no is okay. We need the no's. We need the don't do that. We need the patience. We need these things. We need to be told no. Men, you're going to have to step up. Sometimes saying no is really hard. You don't want to. Because I'll speak about me. And if you relate to me, then we can talk about it later. But no was really hard for me because I felt like a failure because I wasn't giving the things that I wanted to give. Things weren't the way I wanted them. I felt like a failure. Well, you know what happened? I needed to get over myself and say no because that's what was best. Ruling isn't about providing for everybody's every need, every want, every desire, every vacation, every piece of clothing, everything they wanted to make home just so happy and perfect. That's why I've said from the pulpit before, if you struggle financially, you might as well let your children see it. Don't let them live in a false reality that things are fine. So that when they walk into their life at 18 years old, they just think that the money tree's out back, or worse, you're the money tree. That's what you might be teaching. That's not ruling your house well. I've been to your houses. I looked and nobody had the money tree. I was really disappointed. I mean, we could print one with some of the trees we could cut down. I won't go there. Anyway. But, men, these no's are important. Men, I reinforce to you, you're not a failure by not giving anything. You're a failure by not standing up and doing what you're supposed to do. That doesn't get talked about enough. The reality of that situation of ruling your house well, we need to train our young men and these boys. They need to watch us. They need to see us. Rule in a respectable way, in a peaceful way, in a loving way. This doesn't mean that whatever your wife says, you say, shh, be quiet. I'm not going to listen to you. Oh, you get me going again, I'll be preaching. Then there will be windows. Somebody will make a window. That drives me crazy. I can't stand it when men in the past have acted like women have had nothing to say. My wife has helped me out. Lord made her for me because, I wouldn't have these messages if she didn't write them. My wife has helped. She loves that one. She's going to tell me no when we get in the vehicle. Don't do that. She loves that one. Oh, somebody better help me. We'll pause for a drink of water here. Anyway, but don't we have those memories of people, men, that have ruled their house with an iron fist and didn't care what their wives had to say? Said no and not in a loving manner. Were disrespectful. I don't believe that's true. I don't believe that's what it says. There's some elements that your house should have. It should have peace. Before peace, it should have Christ. It should have godly teaching. It should have love. It should have encouragement. It should have respect. It should have happiness. The Lord, in the model of the Christian home, man and wife getting married in God's way, having children in God's way. There's beauty in that. There's happiness in that. Just like walking into a church and seeing the unity, that example we used this morning. There's a blessing in that. What you read in Exodus, it's just recorded. Then Zipporah took a sharp stone and cut off the foreskin of her son and cast it at his feet and said, "Surely a bloody husband art thou to me." She doesn't sound a little, as we use in today's terms, she doesn't sound a little salty at all, does she? Sounds like she's out of place because he wasn't in place. There cannot be inconsistencies in our worship. There cannot be inconsistencies in our service. There cannot be inconsistencies in the way that you run a church. And people all over will go, well, why are you preaching this? Because God's not done calling preachers and pastors and missionaries yet. That's why. It needs to be taught. Ladies, you know I love you. And we just went through this study on modesty and several other things that I taught as frankly as I could. And I thank God for godly women. I thank God for godly Christian women and the examples that they are. But if you're in a place where you're giving orders, you need to tell yourself no. That's not how the house runs. Dad gives the orders. Husband gives the orders. It's not the children. There is an order. We've seen it. It's not the wives. Be very careful. Because you can make it more difficult. You cannot be submissive. No matter Zipporah, or however you say her name, no matter what she wanted, her son was still circumcised. The difference was she could have submitted to it, or she was angry and still submitted to it. You just think about that. I'm not getting into free will, but I just want you to think about that in that regard. As a preacher, you can't leave room for inconsistencies. I hope you understand that through Exodus. When it talks about ruling your house well, and we spoke briefly about that means you can do it not well. In Ephesians, I'll take you to a familiar passage in Ephesians chapter 6. Ephesians chapter 6 opens up with children. It talks about obeying your parents in the Lord. But verse 4 gets in and says, "And ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord." That's hard. That's a hard balance. I found myself at times being angry, disciplining out of anger, disciplining out of frustration. Hey, I might be in control, but I may be doing it the wrong way. When you look at this verse deeper, "And ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and the admonition." Bring them up in the instruction of the Bible. Correct them with the Bible. Have a standard of them following the Bible, whether they're saved or lost. Bring them up in that sort of an environment. Too many people are saying, "Well, my kids aren't saved, so I expect them to be sinners." Well, duh. What's wrong with you? That's just a you problem. You're just too lazy and too selfish to get up and take care of them. You know, what do you expect? You got to instruct them. You ever built something? Women, I'm not talking to men because I know you probably aren't going to follow instructions anyway. You ever built something and you read through the instructions, and those instructions you go, "Well, that doesn't make sense." And you read through it 3 or 4 times, and then you get to the next step and you read through that 3 or 4 times, and you find out it was in Spanish, and then you go back to step 1 and you read it in English 3 or 4 more times. It takes time. You don't just get it right away on the first one. How often, besides the verse "Jesus wept," do you read a verse and memorize it just like that? It takes time. So why do we just expect to say, and this has been my fault as a parent, "I'm going to tell you once, and you're going to listen the first time, and if you don't, there'll be a consequence." Well, guess who was lazy? It wasn't the one that wasn't lazy on the fact that they didn't want to listen the first time. It was me not wanting to discipline on the second time. Am I ruling my house well? Am I provoking to wrath? Boy, I was famous for picking the wrong battles and provoking my kids to wrath. You know, sometimes I have learned that the leadership of a home means not erupting. Sometimes it does. But oftentimes it's dealing in love and in compassion and meekness. Instructing again. Because what if you were the kid and your kid was the parent? Would it be any different? Would you, if but for the grace of God, the roles were flipped, would you listen the first time every time? Would you have to be instructed? It's something to think about. You know, another way to not run your house well, we'll use the example in Haggai chapter 1. Verse 2 says, Thus speaketh the Lord of hosts, saying, This people say, the time is not come, the time that the Lord's house should be built. Then came the word of the Lord by Haggai the prophet, saying, Is it time for you, O ye to dwell in your sealed houses? And this house lie waste. Now therefore, thus saith the Lord of hosts, consider your ways. I really want to keep on reading, but I don't have much time. First, start out with that consider your ways. Consider your ways, men, on how you run your homes. Let's say you're disqualified. Consider your ways as to what you're teaching your children. Consider your ways as to what they're learning. Here in the text, they neglected to build the Lord's house. They were comfortable, neglecting the duty to go build the temple. And it might be slightly out of context, but I don't even know about that. Because most of the reason why we neglect to rule our house well is because we're too comfortable to put the labors and efforts in. Because we've let the world's whitewash standards of what a home look like come in and help us to have a picture of what the home should look like. And that's not right. That's not running your house well. You can't build the house. You can't, I don't know how I want to say it. You can't neglect building a house, running a house, saying no, ruling a house, and neglect serving the Lord and expect to be blessed. You know, as I was reading that, we'll go back to our text in 1 Timothy. One that ruleth his own house. There's a big word in there that I haven't brought up yet. One. One. Nobody else should be running your house. Sometimes you think about who gets involved in your house. Well, it's your friends, it's your in-laws, it's your parents, it's people that have no business being involved in your house. Man, it's your responsibility. It's you. It's on you and you only. You're the one that's going to answer for it. Don't tell me this verse doesn't apply to you, because it does. One that ruleth well his own house. Don't worry about anybody else's. Don't come to church and go, well, there's a problem and there's a problem. Did you see what they did? The Hicks brought me eggs, but they brought me 6 and gave somebody else 2 dozen. Did you see what they did? Must be feeding their chickens the wrong feed. I'm going to go tell them what's going on. If that was all we did, that would be an easy problem. But that's not what we do. Did you see them get out of the car? They slammed the door and they were having a fight right here. Or here's the good one. Here's the good one. Did you see how far away they were sitting from each other during church? They must have been mad. Yeah. Yeah. Don't think I don't know that. When y'all come in and don't say anything and one's over here and one's over here. I bet they were not arguing when they turned the corner into the church. That's all for you. That's extra credit for the week. But isn't that the truth? We don't worry about our own house. It's your house first. You look at your house first. As a preacher, as a pastor, as a missionary, you're charged with the oversight. I'm charged with the oversight of everyone. So my house has to be in line. My house has to function well. My house has to please the Lord. Otherwise, I'm a hypocrite if I come to you and say, what are you doing? I'm not modeling anything. I'm not the standard. The Bible's the standard. We'll fall short of it every time, but we ought to be striving for it. Having his children in subjection with all gravity. There is a problem in this country with parents having their children in subjection. Parents think that the biggest, and I don't care if anybody doesn't like me, and I don't care if they don't agree with this, never seem to let it bother me anyway, but your job as a parent is not to run your child to every sporting event and thing that they want to do 7 days a week just to get them there. Because they're going to be the next greatest athlete, or they're going to be the next politician. I don't want anybody want their children to be a politician, but be the next politician, or be the next this, or the next that. What are you teaching? You're not ruling your house well. It's not the children that you're serving. That's a problem. It's, well, what are we going to do with our kids? What are we going to do for our kids? I was talking to Brother Daniel at lunch, and he was talking about the kids made a joke. And they're familiar with our church because they've been here a few times. And Sister Kathy said something about how they had been to churches and a lot of the churches had no children. Yeah, that's right. Because a lot of the churches let the children a generation ago run out and they were getting them every which way they could get them. And they didn't make church a priority. They didn't make ruling the house well a priority. They didn't have their children in subjection with gravity, with obedience, with respect. I'm not above it. By God's grace, I'm not above it. But by God's grace, I won't lose it. I'll serve Him. You know, having your children in subjection is not a bad thing. But people lose that. It's funny. Down south, you hear people talk about spanking their kids. Up north, they'd be like, "What, did you touch your kid?" And they call the police. Not really, but you don't have the same thought. The only time I've ever had that happen is actually at this church when I was a traveling preacher. You all know that. And I didn't even spank the kid. The neighbor thought I did. I just didn't want him going to the road. But that's the world we're living in. I'll take 10 seconds to explain it for you visitors. Back in 2019, I was preaching here. I was filling in. Leo was just a little butterball of a kid. But man, that kid could run. And his ears didn't work at 3. Hard-headed. We walk out the front door. I'm holding the Bibles. We're getting ready to head home, 7 hours. And I turn the corner because somebody said something to me. And I look, and Leo's at the sign. So Bible's in my hand. I'm running as fast as I can go. I push Leo down at the edge of the road up here. Got him back to the van, took my tie, and I was frustrated. Jacket off, tie off, threw my tie down in the back. He's crying because I pushed him so he didn't get to the road. And the neighbor that is over here comes out that no longer is there and said, "You spanked that kid. You're out of control. I'm calling the police." And I said, "That was my tie. Here's my belt. But you do what you have to do." Alyssa gets in, and I'm flustered. You know, I'm a traveling preacher, never coming back here again. You know, all flustered, right? Alyssa gets in the car, and I'm like, this is what happened. I got to go in and tell them. Little did I know, Brother Brian would take Madison out and spank her on the patio for no reason. And I tried to explain this to them years ago. You know, this is like many, many years ago now. And there was a love that started early on in the church back in 2019, right? But you take those scenarios, and that's what people expect. They don't expect correction. They expect the children to get what they want. I believe my children can have a happy, productive, and wonderful, respectable life, not getting everything they want by hearing the words no. I believe that I can provide all that I need to provide by God's grace for my wife and my children by still using the word no. I believe I can have a happy, healthy, and productive marriage by still using the words no. Men, you don't fail by saying the words no. You fail by being too lazy to use them. Don't get lost in your own self. We see in verse 5, we get back to that rhetorical question. You have to do these things so that you can take care of the church. In Proverbs chapter 29, in verse 15, the rod and reproof give wisdom, but a child left to himself bringeth his mother to shame. Yeah, I've often thought when I get up here and I'll preach and I'll read a passage, I often go, I wonder what other versions say of that. How much do they water that down? How much do they change that? Because the reality is, there's a rod and there's reproof. And if you don't use them, the mamas don't look good. And that's just the truth. That's how you rule your house well. Don't think that because your kids are preachers' kids or missionaries' kids or pastors' kids, that they're perfect, that they're not going to do anything wrong. Don't get so lost in the thought that you're here to preach that you forget about your ministry at home and the importance of that ministry and of raising your children that way. Not disciplining your children. Let me illustrate this on the next point. Go to Proverbs 23, or the next passage rather. This is what not disciplining your children does. And I want you to really think about this. Because your children learn how to discipline their children by you. How would you know to spank your kids if you weren't? How would you know to ground your kids if you weren't? Do you remember those long punishments where you go, man, this is really no fun. I didn't get to do this or I didn't get to do that. But you remembered that you learned the lesson, right? So as hard as it is, you do it anyway. In Proverbs chapter 23 and verse 14, thou shalt beat him with the rod. Hey, there's the rod again. Bible says thou shalt beat him with the rod. People don't like it, but they also don't like a whole lot of other things the Bible has to say. It doesn't mean it's wrong. Thou shalt beat him with the rod and shalt deliver his soul from hell. So if you think that you love your kid and you fall into some false reality that you can talk to your kid about what they've done wrong. And you can. It just might be before or after the rod of correction. You should talk to them. You shouldn't just walk in and use the rod of correction and walk out. It doesn't really do a whole lot. It just makes you seem angry. It's actually, better to go in there with some love and respect and teach them that way. But in this verse, thou shalt beat him with the rod and shalt deliver his soul from hell. That's because you've taught them the inherent nature in them is sin. That the inherent nature in them is not good. And by not spanking your child, by not correcting your child, by thinking everything is cute and fun and wonderful at age 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, it doesn't become cute and wonderful at 13 and 23 and 33. There's a lot of people sitting in prisons today that never had any sort of correction, that have brought their mothers to shame because they just, they're a good kid. I don't want to do anything to them. It's no big deal. There's no room for that in the Lord's houses, in the households that the Lord has given us. There's no room for that. It gives them an understanding of their need for salvation. Aren't you sorry after you remember those spankings? Remember that last good one? I see Brother Derek, he's talked to me about that Bodor one that he had. You don't forget those. Wasn't very comfortable, was it? I think about Brother Tyler Ryle's lesson when he would say his dad comes in and goes, you know when they say this is going to hurt me a whole lot more than it's going to hurt you? It's not. Because we've already went through that lesson. And isn't that true? Because there's something in those that you just don't want to do that again. You're naturally repentant in some way, shape, or form. So why did we get away from it? Spare the rod, spoil the child? Want to bring his mother to shame? Men, you want to know how you can bring your wife to shame? Don't step up and be the man that you need to be to lead the house. You want to know how we can see young marriages fail? Don't teach your boys and girls anything about who needs to be in what place and what they need to do. We're more worried about getting them an education, getting them a job, getting this, getting that. Believe me, if the Lord wants two people to be together, He's going to give them a roof to live under or a blanket. But they'll get by. By God's grace, they'll get by. In Proverbs chapter 12, verse number 1 says, whoso loveth instruction loveth knowledge, but he that hateth reproof is brutish. Let it just burn in all of us, right? Kids, I talk about my favorite ministry position, I'll use air quotes behind it, was the youth group in Wauseon. I loved it. I loved teaching those kids. I loved being with the kids. But kids, you have to understand something. When you're told you're wrong, that feeling that you get that you don't like when mom and dad tell you no or you're wrong, it never goes away. Because when we're adults, it actually gets worse. We get told we're wrong and there's no way around it. You have to practice the patience. Don't hate the reproof. Take it in like a sponge and say, well, why am I wrong? This world wants to say, I'm not wrong, you're wrong. Stay away from me. No. Be a sponge. Now, why was I wrong? Okay, what can I do to not be wrong again? See, this is another conversation we had at lunch. Matsuda said the ham was very good. I said, yes, people ask me to make it for them all the time. Sister Kathy goes, that was kind of a prideful thing to say. I said, I wasn't done. I love that we can joke like this too. It's so wonderful. It's so wonderful to have a personality in ministry. It really is. And I said, but I'm afraid that I'll be like, yeah, here's a ham. And like, what is this? Finally, I didn't do it right. Almost just want it to happen, brother, so I can have a bad one out of the way. Then I can learn, I did this wrong or I did that wrong. We should love knowledge. Sometimes knowledge is going to come to us easy. Now we go all the way back to our very theme of one that rules his house well. If I was to ask every one of you men in here, if you've always, every time, for every second, ruled your house well, and you raised your hand, you'd be a liar. I know I would be. Oh, hey, Brother Daniel. They do things different in Peru. But did you not learn from those times? When we went on our vacation, we took the kids and we let the big two make their own knives at the blacksmith. And I've used that as an analogy with my children over and over again. They took a pony shoe and put it in there, and they made knives out of these shoes. And it took 40 minutes to take this little pony shoe and make it into a knife for both kids with their little glasses and apron and hammers. It's not fun being made into a shape of something that's useful. It takes a lot of work. What we want to do is we want to get to that part where we are already useful so we can be used. And oftentimes I think about pastors, missionaries, preachers. You're not a tool. You're like a multi-tool. You are constantly being shaped for a whole lot of different uses to do things well. We have a hard enough time being shaped into one tool, let alone a whole handful of them. And I've used that for the kids so often about discipline. It wasn't easy for that 2,400 degree fire to melt things down and then pound that metal into a shape. But that's knowledge. How do you rule your house well? By knowledge. By removing yourself out of it. By understanding that everyone in the house depends on you, men, to do the job in which you need to do. Don't ever let disqualifications of this above passage think that you're disqualified from doing these things. I have the most wondrous thoughts sometimes, the Lord calling some of you men, and it's also one of the worst thoughts because I'm so close to you. But I pray He does. I pray He does. But you have to do these things well. This world has somehow measured success of a husband or one that rules their house off of the things that they provide for their family. All the material things that are in this life. Type of education they can get their children. Whether or not you struggle. Man, the measurement of your success is not financially. It's not found here on this earth. It's not found in what you have. It's found. And oftentimes I think of it this way. If there could be any measure of success for a Christian family, and don't take me too far with this, but it's how many generations does the family continue serving the Lord? Something I want you to think about. One that ruleth well his own house, having his children in subjection with all gravity, not some. For if a man know how to rule his own house, how shall he take care of the church of God? Last thing I'm going to say. Excuse me. If the Lord calls me home, or for whatever reason you need a new pastor, one of the things that you should look for, does his wife respect him? Does his children respect him? Are they putting on a show? How does he run his family? I don't believe you should look for somebody that treats his family like they're his slaves. Because that's an indication of how he's going to treat all of you. I don't believe he should be a pushover and let his family do whatever he wants. Because if it was up to the church, you do every program out there, but it wouldn't be the ones that serve the Lord. It would be the things that tickle the church's ears. It should be one that says no with love. It should be one that often explains. My wife and I had this conversation the other day. This is something else I'll leave all of you with, because most of you in here are parents. What is a bad word track that we have as parents? No, because I said so. How in the world are they supposed to learn anything? We have church members that are full in our Baptist churches that say, I believe this because my mom and dad said so. At what point do we stop? There's a time and a place where you say, no, because I said so. And there's a point, no, because if you run to that road, you don't see the car coming. And I don't want you to get hurt. You have the knowledge that your children don't. And sometimes we don't take the time to explain the because I said so's. What if I just did that to all of you? What if I said no because I said so every time you ask me a question? Now, there's a time and a place, and I've had times in places in this ministry where you've asked me questions, and I've had to tell you no because I said so, because maybe it involved another preacher or pastor, and I don't want you to know about it. Or maybe it needed to be a private conversation. But don't look for somebody that just says no because I said so. So don't do that at home. Have some patience. Show some love. Say no lovingly. Have some respect. Understand that we all need knowledge of Scripture. And your kids don't ever lose track of the fact that your kids cannot comprehend what you comprehend. Even though when we get, and this is where it'll hit home, and I'll finish with this. When we get in our 30s and our 40s and we think, okay, well, we've got some kids and we figured things out, don't forget your parents still have seen farther down the road. There's still a need for us as adults to respect our parents. Whether you like it or not. You cannot lose the respect you have for your parents. Whether you think they deserve it or not. Respect is needed. That is how you will tell if you ruled your house well when you had the chance. Don't try to parent your kids when they're 20 or 30. You don't do it when they're 0 to 18, as the world says. Don't try to do it then. You can't unscramble eggs. The cake is already fully baked. There's no chance. You didn't do your job when you should have. Next week will be on avoiding the devil. Not falling into the snares of the devil, not falling into the condemnation of the devil. The devil comes after God's men. And we got to be careful. We'll close our services for the day. It was a blessing to be here with everybody. It was a blessing to see each and every one, to eat, to fellowship, to spend time with each other.